Okay, the floor is open. This is Q&A. Yeah.
Okay, I don't quite know how to ask this question. It's not controversial or anything, but there are a few ways to ask it. One way is, why exactly did Hashem pick the land of Israel, Dafka, as opposed to Mexico or Switzerland or Nigeria? What is unique about the land such that Hashem picked this to be the physical epicenter of the nation?
The truth is, I'm not sure how far back it goes. It's sort of like asking, why is the head such an important part of the body? Where's the brain in it? Why did Kadosh Baruch Hu choose to put the brain in the head? Not because the head was valuable, because if he put the brain in the foot, then the foot would have been valuable. Mm-hmm. The preciousness of the head is post-brain. It's after the brain's in it, then that's what makes it precious. So I could understand, in a kind of general functional sense, there needs to be some place where there's a point of contact between the physical and the spiritual. Mm-hmm. It's important that there be access, but it's important that the access not be ubiquitous, that it not be everywhere equal. Not everyone should have immediate access. People should have to make an effort to gain access. So it's natural that there be some small piece of geography where access is available and everybody else not. Now, I'm trying to imagine the bare geography there and then choosing one spot. Can I explain why? It's, at the easternmost point of the Mediterranean Sea rather than the Middle Atlantic or someplace else? I don't know. I don't know how far back the question goes. I know why it's precious now. You do hear statements like everything was created from here. This is the first starting point. Everything was spread out from here. Mm-hmm. But it's a statement like that sounds to me like, well, I've chosen there to be one point of access, and that's the most important point. That's the point in which everything else leans. So in the creative process, I'm going to start there and then make everything else out of that. But that's because in the future, that's going to be the point of access. Okay. I've made that decision before I started creating. Okay. So it isn't as if, the continent of the corals in the Red Sea, which are doing fine with global warming, and everybody wants to know why, and they're studying how it is that, our corals aren't dying, everybody else is dying. I don't think it's something like that. So I don't know whether it's behind the choice. There's something about it before and independent of the choice that makes it the right thing to choose, or a choice is being made, and then other things are built around the choice. So I'm not quite sure how it goes, to tell you the truth. I haven't studied it. I haven't looked at it in detail. I do know one thing. I believe I saw this in the Kuzari, though I looked for it recently. I couldn't find it. Somewhere it said, and I asked people, somewhere it says that you have at least a wider variation of topography in a small geographical area than you have anywhere else in the world. You have a snow-capped mountain, and you have the Dead Sea, and you have deserts, and you have plains, and you have hills, and rivers, and a large seashore. You have a wide variety, therefore, of economic activity, from pasture land to farming to crafts and the rest. You have commerce, which this source wanted to say means that you'll have Jews whose quality of life matches fairly well the quality of life of other people in the world. Someone comes from anywhere, he's going to find somebody here who understands him, somebody who shares his experience. The only type of topography I think that we're missing today is tropical rainforest. And some suggested that maybe 3,000 years ago they had that also, maybe in the Chula Valley. I don't know. But then it means that if the Jewish people are supposed to be the spiritual bridge for mankind to God, which they are, it would be important that every person anywhere would be able to find a Jew who could say, I know what your life is like. I know what you're going through, I know what you're feeling, I know what's important to you, because I live in similar circumstances. So that's an idea.
Okay.
It's on a fairly superficial level, but it's an idea.
It's uncertain whether or not this land in particular is essential to the plan of creation.
Now again, see now I get. Let me give another different analogy because my point is not getting across. See, I'm trying to think of a good analogy. The question invites a certain mental process. And I'm not sure that the mental process is accurate. The question invites the following process. I've got all sorts of things in my warehouse, all sorts of gadgets and raw materials and so on and so on. And I've chosen one for making a statue. Oh, why did I choose that? Well, I want something that's durable, so that limits the number of things. And I want something that's malleable, so that I can shape it the way I want, that limits the number of things. And I want something which has soft contours because they are more pleasing to the eye, so that limits the number of things. In other words, I have a job that I want to be done, and I'm looking for the thing which already has the right characteristics for the job. Mm-hmm. That's the natural thought process that is suggested by the question. Mm-hmm. But it might not be the right thought process. Mm-hmm. It might not be that there's anything about the physical land or the topography or the variation between plains and varied elevations that qualifies it. It's rather that something needed for a purpose, and he invested this piece with that purpose, and that's what makes it special. Not that there's something special there that made him choose it for the purpose. Mm-hmm. But it's the investment of the purpose. It's like looking for someone to invest a medical scholarship in. So you do a talent search, you come up with about 10 candidates who, as far as you can tell, are about equal. So you flip a coin and pick one. You say, what made you pick one? That one. Well, I wanted there to be a medical specialist, and I was willing to pay for his education, and he was one of the ones who was qualified, so he's the one. He's special after he gets the medical fellowship. He's special after he has the medical. That's what makes him special, is that he now is the medical specialist who can do the medical work. Was it something that made him the unique choice of the one to do it? Maybe not. His specialness is that I've invested in him, and he now occupies a special niche because I've invested in him. Mm-hmm. So nothing prior to that which determined why he was the one that I should invest in. So since that might be the case, I can't just blithely accept the first mental process as if it were naturally the right way to answer the question.
Okay.
That's what bothers me. Yeah.
What's the whole? I see a lot of Jews very strict on what they wear, and how, like, a father gets his son a hat, and every different rabbi has a different hat. every different type of like tradition has different hats. Then when I look back into it, most of the hats that people are wearing didn't come from like past the 1800s. They're fairly modern. They don't go that far back. So why are they so related to Jews? Why it seems when I go into like a shul, and one's stuck in the 50s. I'm trying to wonder what's the connection to it. When did they adopt that as that's like this is now what we're going to start wearing?
Well, that's not what you don't want my answer to be 1936 in June. You want more than that, I think. I think the first thing you have to ask, to go back to fundamentals, is there are two attitudes you could have towards clothing. Maybe there are 16, but there are two that seem to me to stick out. One is that clothes are functional; they do a certain job, and you pick the ones that do the job best. And if there's two groups that do it best, then you pick the cheaper ones. Or they're not just functional. They do something above and beyond, something that's pure function. In particular, they're symbolic. They have a symbolic meaning. So let's ask, from the point of view of the Jewish tradition, the general attitude towards clothes, the general understanding of what clothes are. Is it functional and pragmatic on the one hand, or is it symbolic? I hope that's a no-brainer. Clothes are terrifically symbolic. First of all, you have tzitzis, which have a particular structure, and unfortunately we don't have it. We don't have the blue thread, which carries a tremendous amount of symbolism. And then tefillin are really garments. They're worn. You can wear them on Shabbos and they're worn as garments. Tefillin are extraordinarily important as garments. This is not a question that you could do it with plastic, and you could do it in orange, and you could do it with sequins, and so on and so on. Then you have the clothes of the Kohen. The clothes of the Kohen give him his identity as a Kohen. If a Kohen does the service in the temple without the clothes, the service is disqualified, and the name of the disqualification is Zar. He is, so to speak, a non-Kohen if he does it without the clothes. Clothes make the man. So clothes are definitely classified as symbolic, expressive. Not just a question of keep yourself warm, and then being easy to put on and take off, and waterproof and cheap. Now, actually, I can't speak for all human cultures, but the cultures of which I'm aware, clothes are definitely symbolic, no question about it. Clothes symbolize rank. Clothes symbolize often your profession. People in the army wear special uniforms. People who perform classical music wear special evening wear. They don't come in a polo shirt and shorts to play Beethoven. Beethoven, you don't do that. Judges wear long black robes. That's not comfortable. Think back 120 years when there was no air conditioning. In August, they had to sit there in August in New Orleans with those long black robes, not to mention the ridiculous wigs that they wear in England, which must be horrible. But you're a judge. You're a judge. You don't sit there in comfortable clothes. You sit there in the clothes that bespeak your position, not to mention a king. And at one time, the ministers in his kingdom wore special symbols of their rank. So clothes definitely are symbolic. Then you have to ask yourself, what kind of symbolic function do clothes perform above and beyond the nitty-gritty of Jewish law, where it's absolutely, absolutely legally codified? What other symbolic functions do clothes have? One that is quasi-legal is that, for many sources, your clothes should identify you as a Jew. Some think it's derisa. It's Sanhedrin. So that means if walking down the street, if someone just sees your clothes and cannot know that you're Jewish, then something wrong. Now there are some who dress that way. So there is another opinion. It's another opinion. But that doesn't mean the opinion that I'm describing is somehow wrong. Just a question. It means it is available to have this symbolic expression. The question, whether it's legally required or not. Clothes play a great role in group membership. Group membership is very important. being identified as being a member of the group is very important. Your identification not only signals, but it's your advertisement. It's your, when I was living in Baltimore, I was very close to Rambam Taub, so was a Rabbi there, who had gone through the Holocaust. He was talking about Austria. He said in Austria, there were two military forces. There was the army, which if you were drafted in the army, you would pay, lie, cheat, bribe your way out because it was Gehenna. And then there were the Swiss guards who were guarding the life of the emperor. You remember the Swiss guards, you wore your uniform everywhere. You were the top of the top. You're paid a lot, and you're excellent at fighting, and you're guarding the life of the emperor. And you wanted everybody to know it. So I think this idea of the symbolism of clothes is very, very common culturally. Now, one of the things that clothes symbolize is a value of conservatism. I think there's a deep Jewish value. If there isn't a positive, strong reason to change it, don't change it. If there isn't a positive, strong reason to change it, don't change it. There can be positive, strong reasons. But if there isn't, don't change it. So you say, well, those are the hats they wore in Europe 250 years ago. Yes, so? So what? Is there a positive, strong reason to change it? No, then we're going to continue doing it. I ask, well, where did they come from? Well, at certain times, Jews were migrants. They were migrants to new areas. Every Jewish population in the world is a migrant population. No one started out in New York. No one started out in Germany. No one started out in Johannesburg. As a migrant population, you typically are dependent upon the local population for your goods and services. You don't come in and set up industry and set up clothing factories and set up artistic materials and so forth and so on. So it would be natural for you to use the local resources, because if you come in as a few thousand people into a larger population and you have to make a living and protect yourself, you can't bring your whole lifestyle with you. So that would be a very natural thing to do. In the Gemara, people didn't wear black, because it says if a person's in a certain condition, he should dress black to demoralize himself, to make himself feel like a failure. So it means people didn't wear black. The cultural nature of black changes from time to time. You are affected by the culture around you. For us, formal black wear indicates the high value of what you're doing. There's a high value of being a judge. You graduate and get a degree. For a couple of hours, you wear a long black robe. Wow. And those ridiculous hats. You think a yarmulke is funny? What about those rectangles with tassels hanging, right? They take a picture and then throw it in the garbage. Who needs it? But, because you got a degree, and that's worthy of honor. So you wear a long robe, because that's what gives it honor. So the idea of symbolizing important values and conservatism, so you don't change things that there's no positive good reason to change them, is one reason for the clothes that we wear. And I think that within the acceptable styles, by and large, the clothes that are chosen by the religious community do a good job of expressing those values. They're conservative. The colors are muted. They cover the body amply. The message that they send is, I'm a serious person, and I'm doing things that are important. And I'm living a life that I think is a valuable life, and I'm focused on it, and it requires attention and care. Those are the messages that the clothes send. So I'm sure there's more to be said, but this is
just to confirm, I understand why. It makes sense. Don't change it if it ain't broke. Don't fix it. But the way they adopted it.
So I explained to you. If you're an immigrant population, you're coming to New York from North Africa, right? All 16 of you. What are you going to do? Set up a shop and make your local clothes from North Africa? You have no choice. You have to buy the local clothes.
If you could pick a specific time period from where it seems like the general population of people who wear hats, people who wear black hats, whatever type of hat it might be, would have come from early 1900s? Would it come from?
People were coming all the time. I mean, you know that.
But at some point,
But where were they coming from? Where were they coming from? They were coming from Greece. They were coming from Poland. They were coming from Italy. They were coming from Russia and so forth and so on. And they were coming in hundreds.
But they had different kinds of hats.
But they didn't bring hat factories with them from Russia. They came to New York.
But at one point, people decided, oh, we're all going to start wearing fedoras. We're all going to start wearing.
Well, they don't. You know very well that there are lots of different groups that have lots of different styles.
But those specific groups all have the same style. It's not one person has a top
So
hat.
they came to New York and they looked at the various things, and you could wear a felt hat with a brim here and a brim here and a hunting cap with a duck on top, or you could wear something that was
available. But it seems like it's not. Someone who makes hats, they make multiple different kinds of hats. Like, I'm not going to make just one hat, and this is how you have to deal with it.
That's right. So they looked for ones that they felt were inexpensive, and they were respectable, and they weren't flashy and flamboyant. So lots of hats are flashy and flamboyant. They're designed to be that way. We don't want flashy and flamboyant hats.
I'm trying to understand how this uniform became adopted for specific. The whole group is wearing the same type of hat, the same type of clothing.
Because
they know that based off of the hat, that it's that type of chassid group. It's that.
Okay, history is endless, and we can go back to the Middle Ages and back to ancient Greece and so forth and so on. People come to a place. They come to a place in small numbers. They have local industries. They want to identify with the group by their clothing, which Jews always did. And someone picks it up, or the rabbi picks it up, and somebody says, "Yeah, well, I want to show that I'm related to the rabbi." So I mean, of course, as I said, identification with a group is a very important thing, and that's why there is a variety. But they're very similar in what they express. They all express a certain seriousness, a certain sense of value, a certain sense of focus, and yes, and group identity. And by the way, so do the polo shirts and jeans, right? The pre-shrunk, faded and slitted jeans, so that they don't look new when you buy them, because they look new. You don't want to look like that, right? These are the people for whom clothes are trivial and casual, and and they're just doing it for you because they've every crease, every nick, every little hole, and it's been planned and programmed because that's what. Give me a break. Yeah.
So I went to a secular high school, and it was a middle school, and then I left. But while I was there, they used to preach a lot of the time of being environmentally aware, always, and they would display pictures of pretty graphic of a bird filled in with plastics. To tell you to stop using plastics because this is harming the environment, and to reuse, reduce, recycle. I was wondering, is there a basis in Judaism? Could it be hurting animals? Because I know that we're not allowed to hurt animals. So if we're consuming a lot of plastics and that's getting into the ocean, that's hurting. I'm not an environmentalist. I just wanted to know because plastic is getting into the ocean. It is affecting the wildlife in the ocean, and also it's affecting birds, and it's affecting. So, just a question: do we have an obligation as a human race or society to be more aware, to conserve the seas, to conserve the forests, and
It's a complicated subject, and I will, at the risk of alienating a lot of people, and this is being recorded, but I've gotten to the age and to sense of detachment where I don't particularly care. So much of the information that you were fed is false. So much of it is irresponsible. So much of it is, at best, guesswork. If it's not out and out lies, that the whole area is, to my mind, very untrustworthy. I wouldn't say that everything's false, but I would say that we have no way to tell which things are false and which things are true. You might try a little Google, environmental predictions over the last 40 years from these people who are scientists. See what they predicted would happen and see if it happened. Almost every prediction turned out to be false. Almost everyone. So Paul Ehrlich, the second edition of his book, with detailed date-by-date predictions, and they all turned out to be false. And he was chosen by Obama to be the head of his Council of Scientific Advisors. I mean, this goes on and on and on. Then, plastic straws, right? The United States is responsible for about 0.5% of all the plastic in the seas. China and India are responsible for 40%, right? And the plastic straws are responsible for 1% of the plastic, that 0.5% of the plastic that's going into the seas. Don't you use your straws, man. You're really destroying the wildlife. Give me a break. I saw an article in the New York Times about 5 years ago. The headline of the article was, "Since there's no evidence that recycling has any environmental benefit, why do we still do it?" After 40 years of legislated, in New York they have 3 different bins, and different trucks and everything else, there's no evidence that it has any positive effect. Golly, we're strangling all the fish. Where are all the fish's lives we saved, right? Wildlife, we're worried about wildlife, right? Do you know what windmills, the ones that produce wind electrical power, do you know they kill birds and wildlife all the time? They don't tell you about that because it's the whole thing is so. There's a fellow named Jeff Jacoby who writes for the Boston Globe, but he happens to be conservative. He also happens to be a Shomer Mitzvahs. And he's written a long series of articles on environmentalism over the last 20 years. Look him up and read. And everything is footnoted. It's very funny because I was sending this to somebody a year ago, and so I Googled it, and then it comes up, a page comes up, refutations of Jeff Jacoby's articles. Oh, really? Well, he's attracted attention, Ad kedei kach, the people want to take his articles and show why he's wrong. So I Googled it. Page not found.
Would it be
So if you could prove that your activity was having a measurable effect on wildlife and so forth and so on, and you could also prove that the effect on wildlife wasn't worth paying for the sake of the good that your activity brings you, if you could show that, then maybe there would be a motivation, and then you'd have to say, well, how many things do we have for which we have a motivation to take care? About 300. So this also is one of 300. What number is it, 288? Then maybe, although it's worthy, but it has no claim on being more important than the 287 that are before it. So all that would have to be calculated before we go out and have signs and save the planet and so forth and so on. I think the thing is gigantically overdone, and the level of things that are important to us will be quite low on the level of things that are important to us. So I don't think that that's something that a person should be worried about, and I think a person should develop a healthy skepticism of these kinds of press reports when you go back in the year Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth about the year 2000, everything was going to collapse. Just didn't turn out to be true.
Healthy skepticism.
And by the way, a healthy skepticism means being skeptical of skepticism also. It means exercising skepticism across the board. So I can't get excited about it. I don't think it's. I think Rabbi Tat says something on it. There are a couple of books going through Jewish sources about general environmental concerns. So
like pollution, like the pollution on the streets, the pollution in the parks, on the beaches.
Okay,
forests.
there you're not talking about pollution that causes disease. You're talking about something which is ugly. And we do have a concern for the general aesthetics of the area in which we live. It's not right to litter. It's something which is definitely inappropriate because it means that your attitude towards the environment is one of not appreciating the fact the environment has an effect on the people who are around you. Not only aesthetically, but midos. The person who drops something on the floor, his attitude is the world is my garbage can. Really? The world is your garbage can. The Ramchal writes in the Mesilas Yesharim, first chapter, I gave you a world, quoting Chazal, I gave you a world. Pay attention not to destroy my world. Pay attention not to harm my world. Okay, so it's not your world. Would you drop your trash in somebody else's living room? No? Well, this is somebody else's living room. Capital S, capital E. It's somebody's world. Do you step on ants outside? I don't think you have to look down all the time and make sure you don't step on ants, but to purposely step on an ant is 1 trillion times more complex than the whole of Earth's computers put together. And you're just stepping on it? Just no appreciation for the Bria, for the Kodesh Baruch Hu's Bria. Anyway, that's all I have to say about the subject. Yeah. You have a question?
Yeah. How does Kabbalah relate to other areas of Torah study?
The very opening of the Shulchan Aruch has a quotation from Maimonides' Guide to the Perplexed. Rambam quotes it. And in it he says that you don't behave in the throne room of the king the way you behave on the street. If you realized that God is present, always, continuously, you'd behave wherever you are more like being in the king's throne room than just being anonymously out on the street. So this is the book of Jewish law and custom. And it starts with a quotation from the most sophisticated, abstruse piece of Jewish philosophy ever produced. And when he quotes the words, I place God before me continuously. If you look in the Mishnah Berurah, he brings from a Kabbalistic source which particular name of God you should picture being in front of you, what letters and what vowels should be used when you're perceiving God in front of you to fulfill that verse of having God present to me continuously. The first words in the book of Jewish law and custom include a statement from the most abstruse Jewish philosophy and a reference to Kabbalah. That's a good example of how Jewish learning is integrated. Everything is integrated with everything else. Everything's connected to everything else. When you read the Talmud, on one page, you can have 30 references to 30 different subjects because everything is connected to everything else. Sometimes it's a one-step connection, sometimes it's a six-step connection, but everything is connected. You look at the commentators, very often the themes that are on the page of the Talmud, though not advertised as Kabbalistic, they really are based on Kabbalah. The blessings that you make often make reference to Kabbalistic themes. So it's an area of Jewish learning, and the Jewish learning and Jewish practice is a single integrated scheme. Now, when you have an integrated scheme, it contains, sort of like studying the heart. I met someone once who said, I'm studying the heart because muscles fascinate me. And the heart's maybe the most important muscle in the body. So I'm studying muscles to understand the heart. I said, really, what about the nervous system? No, Rabbi, I'm studying muscles. The heart's a muscle. Yeah, but the beat is beat from a charge of a nerve. If you don't know the nervous system, you don't know why it beats. Oh, well, let's see now. Yeah, what about nutrition? Without nutrition, it's going to die. So what about the stomach, which provides the nutrients that keeps the heart alive? Oh, yeah, Rabbi. I guess maybe nutrition is important for the heart also. I mean, it's a system. Everything's related to everything else. So there's really no escaping it. I want you to know, people aren't aware of this, but all of the great scholars of the Jewish tradition of the last 500 years, more, knew Kabbalah. The Gaon of Vilna was, according to many, the greatest Kabbalist of his time. And he wrote long, abstruse Kabbalistic commentaries. People who think of him as giving them halakha in the Shulchan Aruch don't know that. this sort of hidden, but it's the truth. He wrote a page on Tzafet Tzinusa. There's one page of text and 500 words of commentary. So Kabbalah always was part of Jewish learning, just wasn't publicized.
About the organs, but like we basically know what the different organs are, but within the context of Talmud Torah, Kabbalah seems something really like far away and like unreachable.
Well, that's only because of the community you happen to belong to. I was here in Bukharim, this up the hill over here, where the Sephardim have their institutions there. I used to live behind the yeshiva. Sometimes I daven mincha Marav over there. So I was there. I daven mincha. I was waiting for Marav. It was sort of dusk, and a kid came over to me. Now it's hard to know how old. Maybe he was 10 or 12, something like that. Complete stranger, and he says to me, "Why do we daven Marav?" Why are you asking me? Well, the Gemara says that Shachas and Mincha are a mitzvah, and this is Rishus, but it's not really Rishus, because Tosfos says that if you didn't take off your belt, I started to tell him this. He said, no! Za and Nukve are in Zivug, and the Zivug has a Tosa in Arich, and he starts giving me this whole Kabbalistic formula. It went on like that for 3 or 4 minutes, and then he just turned around and walked away. What happened here? Who is he? Why did he pick on me? Right? Sephardim started Kabbalah when they're kids, and the Sephardim are there, and they learn the formulas, and they recite it, and it's not hidden for them.
Why is there a difference?
Different communities emphasize different sorts of learning.
But if it's one integrated thing, why not learn all of it?
Oh, because it's not practical.
Why?
Right? Because there's so much of it. You're going to study the 10,000 molecular machines in the cell when you're studying the heart. Maybe if you're an Einstein of biology, maybe you could do that. But most people have to specialize because lifetime isn't long enough to study everything. And the question of what each community sets certain priorities, and the priorities changed over time. No one studies Torah today the way it says in the Talmud. Nobody.
So everyone's knowledge is incomplete?
Of course. Except for the great scholars. Of course it's incomplete. What did you expect?
I mean, wouldn't it be at least good to have like a general knowledge of all these different areas?
How about a general knowledge of geography? All the space of the Earth's surface. Underwater also.
That's specific. That's not general.
But no one's going to do all of that specific either. No, the whole Earth's surface, the deep sea trenches, the fossils that are under the Antarctic. What are you talking about?
There's fossils under the Antarctic?
Yeah, as a matter of fact. Yeah. In fact, there were carboniferous trees growing there once upon a time.
Really?
Google it. Okay, enough. Yeah.
Is there an Indian person who marry a girl that she's got the same name as his mother?
I'll tell you. This name is something which is a subject of many different minhagim. There are those who will change names, who will add names. Well, to the boy, to the girl, to the mother, just so that it won't be the same name. They'll add a name. Adding a name is something which is, I think, fairly uncontroversial, though my Rabbi would never do it. My Rabbi would never change the name that was given to the child when it was first given. He felt it was given with Ruach HaKodesh. It should never be changed, but others did change names. So it's something which you have to have someone who you rely on for your decisions. You have to go and check and have it done. My Rebbe had very strict, but I know other people who faced that problem, and a name was added, and then they went ahead. And of course, it all depends upon your customs. The Sephardim name for the living. It's a covet to name, for your father, for your living grandfather, and so forth and so on. Right? When Ashkenazi would never do that. So it depends upon what the customs are in your group.
Is there a general thing for the Ashkenazim to go with shidduch or to take it down?
I'm not hearing you.
Is there a general thing for the Ashkenazim to stick with a shidduch or to not even go into such a...
Oh, I don't know. I don't know if it's general. I think it's different from... Because my Rebbe was very strict about not changing. Diane Fisher, I think, did change names. So I don't think you can... But they're both Ashkenazim, so I don't think you can divide it up that way. There are different shittas about names. Yeah.
So if you look online, you could find cosmologists' predictions for the deep time in the universe, the deep eschatology in the universe. They'll say, in 1 billion years, California will split off from North America, and in 10 billion years, the moon's orbit will be far enough away from the Earth that it'll split off and drift away. Without getting too much into time, like particular time scales, can you give us maybe a sketch of like Jewish eschatology? What is going to happen? Like what is going to progress into deep time?
Well, according to many, nothing's going to progress into deep time. 6,000 years is it. After that, there's a seventh thousand, which is in a destroyed state, and after that, the physical universe as we know it ceases to exist.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not going to happen through natural processes.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no conflict here.
I'm not curious about the conflict, just analogously.
There are those, but there's a tiny minority who say that the physical universe as we know it will remain forever. Maimonides says that. But he's a very, very small minority. There's a statement in the Talmud that by the year 6000 the Mashiach will come, and then the 7,000 will be one which is what's called choruv, destroyed, and after that, the whole thing, it goes into a state of being that's completely different from what we know now altogether. So what you have to do with those projections that you're talking about is remember that they all have on page 0 the guiding principle. If everything stays the same as it is now, this is what will happen. And of course the if is something which our tradition rejects. So we don't take much interest in those predictions.
Most of Jewish sources believe in the eventual dispensing of or obliteration of the physical world.
Absolutely. I would say transformation, but it wouldn't be obliteration. So many, the Kabbalists say that nothing will be annihilated. In Olam Haba there'll be mosquitoes. I don't know if that makes you happy or sad, but they won't bite. They won't be doing the same things that they.
So after that, there'll be no time either.
There will be time, because
Without the physical world.
Well, time requires change, and measured time might require a physical world, but sequence. You see, time has at least two different dimensions. One is sequence, and the other is a measure.
Mm-hmm.
And you can have sequence without measure. This, and then this, and then this, and then this. But how long? No measure. Just this, and then this, and then this, and then this.
Olam Haba.
Olam Haba is described as continuous change. Particular continuous change.
No measure.
So I don't know. I don't remember seeing measures of years and centuries and so on and so on. Just change. There's change in the experience that souls have. So change means first this, and then this, and then this, and then this. That is a sequence of time. Earlier and later, yeah.
I was having a discussion with a Breslav Chassid, and he told me, we were talking about the Gimel Ikrim, and he said that Breslav Hasidim, the Rabbi Nachman told them not to learn a specific sefer from the Rambam, Moreh Nevuchim, because it could confuse them hashkafically, and also there's a lot of problems even in that sefer. And I asked him, what are those problems? And he told me, he didn't get into too much detail. He said there are issues. One is that Rabbi Nachman, the rationality, like the amount of how deep his works go into rational thinking, with regards to emuna, and how how problem it is for one to have their emuna completely rooted in rational that's just, you only have this emuna because it's rational to you, it makes sense to you. He's not taking any courage or leaving, so it's been like he's, and it's like a comfort zone because I understand this and this, that's why I have emuna. Not like, okay, I don't understand everything, but I'm still believing that Hashem's running the world.
First of all, I think you put him in an impossible situation, didn't you? He told you it's their custom not to learn the Sefer, and then you're asking him in detail, what is it about the Sefer that you shouldn't learn?
I wanted to know
I mean,
why,
you
yeah.
know,
So
well, but
I wanted to know
then,
why
but
they're
that's
not
that's
learning.
really a little bit unfair, right? Because his position is you're not supposed to learn it. He's supposed to say, yeah, but I didn't follow the rules, and I did learn it, and therefore I can tell you. Okay, number one.
No,
So,
no,
and
no,
that-
no, he didn't learn it. I just
Oh,
told him like what's.
But then it's unfair to ask him, right? I mean, because how's he going to tell you the shortcomings of the Sefer that he didn't learn? So he'll tell you what he heard from hearsay,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay, but the truth is that if you want sources on this, I give you two sources. There's the Chovos Levavos. There's a modern translation and commentary called the Lev Tov, which is really quite good. The first chapter is abstruse philosophy, and the author of the Lev Tov did not translate that chapter and did not write a commentary on that chapter. But instead, he gathered together something like 23 responsa from various authorities against studying the material in that chapter, which would apply to the Rambam also. Well, 23 responses, not a small number, and these were responsible people, and they said you shouldn't study it. The reason most often given is that it can confuse people. It's complicated, it's subtle. If you get half the story and not the other half, it could lead you astray. And like anything else in life, there's a cost-benefit analysis. And if there's considerable danger, then you're better off taking a more pedestrian path and not sort of expose yourself to the danger. That's correct. On the other hand, the greatest of the leaders of the past several hundred years studied it. The requirement to analyze our basic principles of belief. I have it on my blog because someone challenged me about this, and you find it in the Chovos Levavos, and you find it in the Shloh, and you find it in the Maharsha, and you find it in the Mabit. Great authorities who said you should not only believe on the basis of what the tradition teaches you, you should also analyze to understand on your own that these things are true. These are great, unquestioned authorities. The Moreh Nevuchim is quoted by Hasidic leaders and by Kabbalistic leaders. The Leshem, one of the great works of Kabbalah, Rav Eliashiv's grandfather, great works of Kabbalah, quotes the Rambam with the greatest of reverence. The Moreh Nevuchim quotes with the greatest of reverence. So I would say, on the one hand, there's a danger there, and it's not wrong to be worried about the danger and to stay away from it. The Rambam never says what you mentioned, and which is missaid in his name, that you can prove everything, you should only rely on your logic. He never says anything like that. On the contrary,
I didn't say that. I'm saying that
You did say it.
the person.
It's
The person
recorded.
told me.
No, it's
The person told
recorded.
me- The person told me. I'm saying what the person told me.
Right.
Why they don't learn the.
Correct.
Rambam.
I understand that. I understand.
I said my own.
No, I understand that, but
The
I'm
person
saying-
told me they don't learn Rambam because.
Because
he
right,
holds,
and he never said any such thing, but he did say, because the first words of the Mishnah Torah are that it's tzorech leida sheyeh sham Elokah. Leida means to know means to have reason. That doesn't exclude believing it because you have a tradition and trusting the people who taught you. It doesn't exclude that. But in addition to that, you also ought to have reason. In addition, certainly not, I believe it only because I could prove it. Certainly not. But there's a mitzvah to know. And others said the same thing as well. So it's not a foreign idea that you should have this, but not everybody has to do that mitzvah. Some people say that mitzvah is too dangerous, and if it's too dangerous, I'm not doing it. And that's a perfectly reasonable position to take. Yeah.
So I was reading the Kuzari, and it said something. It had a few different portions about how great living in the land of Eretz Yisrael is. Aside from one part where it said that someone, I forgot which rabbi, someone asked the rabbi if he is allowed to leave Eretz Yisrael to go do yibum, and he said, because his brother died, he said his brother was an idolater, and it's a it's a shame that he ever left, because he already died when he left, and it would be a sin if you left now. And then it mentions another part in the Kuzari where it says it's better to live in Israel, where there is no Jewish life, than live Chutz La'aretz with Jewish life.
I have to see those quotes. I'm skeptical. I'm sorry. I'm skeptical. What you should live in a place where there's no minyan and no way to learn Torah and so forth and so on because you're on the geography of the land of Israel. I don't believe.
Of course not.
So then,
the words were less.
But no is not the same as less. You know that. Come. No Jewish life? Come on.
Well,
Less? Yeah, how much is less?
Significantly less.
Okay, how much is significantly less? 62? 447? I mean, we're talking extreme vagueness here. But I will tell you what the halacha says. The halacha says there are three reasons why a person can legitimately leave the land of Israel. Not only not come, but he can leave. One is to make a living. And the commentators say make a living means to have an income about which you feel confident. You're not worried all the time. You're not insecure all the time. And you have your basic needs met. You're not always heroically denying yourself. So, no, you don't have to do that. If you do it something, maybe something great, but you don't have to do that. So leaving it. Number two, to learn Torah. And the commentators say explicitly, it doesn't mean there are no yeshivas in Israel, and there are yeshivas outside, so you have to go there to learn. No! A person from whom you learn best, from whom you understand, from whom you make your best progress outside the land of Israel, it's appropriate for you to leave the land of Israel to go learn. And to get married. And that would include marrying a woman who doesn't want to live in the land of Israel, and she's the one who you feel would be the best mate for you. You can leave the land of Israel for those things. So, this is halacha. This is not more and some and better, and this is straight halacha. So I don't think that you can paint it in absolute terms. I would like to see the Kuzari because of course you're dealing with a translation, so you have to you didn't write it in Hebrew, so.
I was reading the green one.
Okay.
Is there any shaykhs to going out of your way to live in Israel, like an obligation to live in Israel to fulfill certain mitzvahs that you can't do outside of Israel?
Well, today,
there's still some.
I mean, there are the ones. It's a little tricky. Which ones? Trubas and Maisras. If you get produce from the land of Israel, you take Trubas and Maisras in Chicago. So that could be done. The mitzvahs today are derabanan; they're not deraisa. According to most shitas, so but there's the kedusha of the land, let alone the question of the legal. All other things being equal, you belong here. That's something which I think everyone could agree to. If other things are equal, or very often they're not equal. But if not, and my Rabbi used to say, you ask a Jew in Flatbush, how's your Jewish life? Rabbi, I live in Flatbush. I have my shul, I have my yeshiva, I have my Beis Yaakov for the girls, I have my mikveh, I have my 72 minutes after Shabbos, I have glad kosher meat. What do we have for breakfast? We don't lack anything. He says, yeah, you lack Eretz Yisrael, and you don't even know it. You're not even aware of it. There's no question that other things being equal, the Jew belongs here. My Rabbi Zatzal worked very hard to convince people that they should come. If they were at all possible, they should come. Not that there aren't good reasons to be outside. There are, but if everything is equal, then a Jew belongs here.
So the factors to consider is if it's comfortable, then you can live in Israel, because it's comfortable. If it's comfortable for you to make an income, for you to learn, and for you to
That's pretty close. There are also cultural factors. It's better now, but when I came, for an American, living here was pretty tough. No lines. There are no lines. You yell louder, you get served. El Hal had no lines. You walk up to the desk, hello, I have a ticket in a half hour, get help. It was the Wild West. It was the Wild West. It was unbelievable. Now they have lines. They have to, but it didn't used to be that way. It was very tough. As an American, and I'm not aggressive that way. I first came here. I was in King George in Jaffa Street. This was 1964. It was a bus. I had to catch the bus. It was pretty full. I look and I see the people getting on, and I think, sort of just make it. I'll be able to get on. So I picked my foot up to climb up on the thing. A little old lady, she had to be 75, stepped in front of me, elbowed me in the ribs. I fell flat on my back on the floor, and the bus door closed and drove away. And I said, "Welcome to Israel." And people had chickens on the buses, and sometimes goats on the buses. And it was really the Wild West. So not everybody can take that. There was no air conditioning. I know Jews in those days who didn't come because there was no air conditioning. I cannot live a whole 6 months of the year. I can't go outside. And I'm feeling choked all the time.
That's extreme. That's an extreme lack of comfort.
Yes, and that's quite.
Nowadays, where it seems like the comfort level is really just the American lifestyle, because as Israel progresses in comfort levels, America very much progresses in comfort.
And so that makes it worse, because you're used to that. No American. If you talk about the poverty line, this is very interesting. The American poverty line. So the Jews in Israel, 80% of them are below the poverty line. But the Israeli poverty line, disproportionately, Haredi Jews live below the poverty line. It's terrible. About 5 years ago, they did a study on longevity, general health, and happiness. The Haredim are the most successful population in the country. They live longer, they live healthier, and they're the most happy. And they're the most under the poverty line. This was a gigantic mystery. How could it be? We have so little money. And yet you live and you're happy and you're healthy? How could that possibly be? No trips to Cyprus, no climbing in the Alps. How could you be? 6 kids in one bedroom? How come? My present wife has 14 children. And she lived in a 3-bedroom apartment.
14 children in a 3-bedroom apartment?
That's right. Her kids are wonderful. Every one of them. Echad. They're wonderful kids, right? They didn't turn out to be twisted and depressed and addicts and so on and so on. So they can't understand it. They can't imagine how that could possibly be.
So it's subjective.
Yes, it's subjective, and it's maybe relative is a better word, because objective has a negative connotation. It's relative. It's relative to what you expect. It's relative to what what your interests are, what you're trying to accomplish in life. Are you showing off for the Joneses? I had a new addition to my apartment this year. Oh wow, you're doing well. I mean, what's important to you?
Would you be able to make a statement of where someone is obligated to at least make the small leap?
It's quantitative. I can't do that. It would require someone who knows him and knows the Torah well to have the sensitivity to be able to say that. But air conditioning, as you understood, is something which, for many people, without air conditioning, I just can't function. I can't do it.
You'll die in Arizona if you don't have air conditioning.
I gave a shiur in Arizona in January. And it was quite pleasant. They said if they're interviewing somebody for a job, they bring them down in December, January. What they don't tell them is the other 10 months of the year you can't be outside. You'll die!